This session is actually going to be a live recording of a podcast. So Rebecca and Harriet have a podcast, and they'll just cut this bit out so that they don't have me blabbing in it. So any questions that you have afterwards, we'll just go straight to the end of the session, and then we'll pull them through there. So just a little bit about these two lovely ladies. So Harriet is a communications and people engagement manager at Sky. She has nearly 15 years experience in comms journalism, public affairs, in companies such as Hackney Council, UK Civil Aviation Authority, Transport for London, Sky, Merton Council, Hackney Council, the list goes on. And then we have Rebecca Roberts, who is the founder of Thread and Fable, which is a marketing and communications setup bringing expert practitioners together to deliver award-winning results. So I'll pass over to these guys, who's going to record their episode now. So good luck.
Thanks,
and I'll see you at the end.
Thanks. Well, this episode we're recording live at commsHERO 2022, and we're talking all about moving with the tide through all the change of the pandemic and what this year's been like, and how we've kind of personally and professionally been riding the wave, any lessons we've learned, although I must say we're no self-help gurus, and what we're thinking about as communicators going through it all. Hi, Harriet. I mean, it's perhaps a bit of an understatement of the year to say there's been a lot of change. How are you, and how are you really when it comes to all of this?
Well, since we last recorded this, I have had a whirlwind of 9 months. I have gotten a new job. I have gone back to Sky. So I've been ranked back to Sky, which is a interesting turn of events, as most people have said. And also I have taken on a new role around products. I've never worked in products before. So that is working with all the TV products and the roadmap, so looking after the Sky Glass, which is something you product. So it is a whirlwind working product. And I think the other thing as well is just going back to the office. I mean, I'm in the office, as you can see, I'm in this random booth, but I'm in the office 3 to 4 days a week. Loads of change in my life.
I mean, kind of the same. Like, I've had lots of different projects this year, and we've kind of laughed about like the way we've kind of worked and changed. And I think what's really been strange is kind of getting back to actually seeing people in real life and real events and things. Like virtual events like this are great, and we've got loads of hybrid events, but it's quite an adjustment, I think, going through those sort of social events and sort of time with clients. And I know a lot of people have really struggled with that, getting back into the office. Some people have really loved it, some people not so much. And we did talk about this last season, that whole kind of new normal, but I think we're never going back to pre-pandemic life. So I think, I mean, I don't know whether you've got any advice around like kind of handling it, but I think it's just being really honest about how you feel about different things, whether that is hybrid working or I guess the social side of like going to an event and then needing time to kind of recover afterwards. I don't know about you.
It's a hard one because I've gone from being at home and probably coming to the office 1 or 2 days a week to now being in the office 4 days a week in a completely different job, completely different sector. It's been an interesting challenge. I think it's all just about really, how am I going to ride the wave? What are the things that I sort of need to put in place, the habits, standards, what's consistent in my life? What are those things that I sort of are my anchor things? So you and I love exercise, so that's an anchoring point for me. Eating healthy is an anchor point, getting to bed early is an anchor point, professional development. But then it's also all the other things around the change. So even though I've had all these huge changes, I think about all the changes in society. So we've had the COVID rules change, we've had travel's opened up again, which has thrown a lot of things in the mix. We have the cost of living crisis. We have a new prime minister, which I won't go into because
we haven't got time for that, Harriet.
We've now got a king from a queen. You know, Instagram is no longer the number one app, as opposed to TikTok's taking over. We've got a war in Ukraine. I mean, everything is just blown up.
Yeah, I think there's two good points that I want to kind of pick on. I ran an event with a colleague a few weeks ago in Birmingham, the TikTok event, and me and two of the other speakers messaged the next day and we were like, have you built in a quiet day today? Because I really needed that for myself. I'm like an extrovert introvert, and I felt like totally spent after kind of doing that in-person event, which sounds really ridiculous me saying it here, but I just think that is something I just build in for myself because I know that I'll feel kind of maxed out afterwards. But yeah, with so much going on, I think it's as communicators as well, it's like, how do we even manage that stakeholder or the comms mix? And I think a key thing for me is like doubling down on what I know about in terms of comms and that people first thing, because I think that reading the room and that empathy and listening, whether that's social listening or just understanding what your audience or different stakeholders need, as well as yourself, is really important. Like, how many people didn't read the room right in terms of like the royal funeral? So many brands. I think with the pandemic, that continual change, like, oh, it's the first time we've done this. It is, but we go back to those kind of skills that we have. And I think that's kind of an important grounding thing for me, just knowing like, okay, well, I haven't dealt with talking to an audience about cost of living crisis, but we have talked to people in a real state of flux for the past 3 years. One campaign I did last year was with students. And it was really interesting because there was a sense that students with the results and like clearing are going to be really anxious and really worried about everything. And this campaign was for UCAS, and they were like, actually, yes, but what we want to do is create space for people because not everyone's feeling the same. So that whole listen to the audience and not assuming you know how they're feeling about a situation is really important. And we had a whole messaging framework, which is based on a spectrum of emotions, effectively. So some people really happy with results, want to celebrate, some a bit concerned, and not going to one or the other. And I think that's how we all feel. But I think that's really a good kind of premise for some of this complicated comms right now, is that let's not assume that, you know, the cost of living thing is really important. We were literally just talking before we started this about something Harriet's been done today around like, how do we speak to staff and support staff right now? And I think it's really interesting. Let's not assume we know what people want or how they feel about something. So that whole asking and listening is, I think, the most important thing at the moment, with just the amount of craziness going on.
But also, so two things. So one is really around fewer, bigger, better. And my boss is trying to drill that into us, and it's sort of one of our big business narratives at the moment. But when people are so overwhelmed by things, doing fewer, bigger, better, especially with comms, will help in the long run. Because if you have really tiny pieces of things going out, people get really confused by the messages, and especially when there's overwhelm. So people will lose things. So fewer, bigger, better just works for me now. It's like fewer things, bigger and better, and then just sticking to those key messages and narratives. And I think it really helps when you work somewhere or when you're in an organization that really knows its mission and its focus. And I've been in organizations like that, but I think also as a comms team, you have to really narrow down what are those things we're wasting time doing, those reports that are not doing anything for anyone, that no one reads. Like, can we add measurement in there? We add measurement in there. We know how many people are clicking it. If not a lot of people are engaging with it, cut it. What are those, nonsense events or meetings that you have to keep going to? You're not contributing in the meeting. You're probably doing other things at the same time, and you're probably not even focused. But the other thing as well is, what are the things you're going to just ride out and let them go with the wave, versus what are the things you're going to engage with? And I think the really interesting one for me was around the political climate, especially. I think a lot of organisations have hooked onto this thing of, we have to be seen to commenting on everything, and we have to be seen to be involved in everything. We have to make a meme or a gif or a thing about everything. And I think about, Will Smith and the slap. What was the point in everybody getting involved in that?
I know. I literally was with a client, and I think we talked about this, didn't we? But I was with a client the day after that moment, and they were like, the digital team were like really excited. We're going to put something about that and promote tickets. And I was like, why would you do this? Like, but why? You don't have to have a hot take on it. And actually the take has got a pretty dark side around violence. Like, what's your reasoning? And I think that with so much change at the moment, I think it's a buzzword, isn't it? And it's annoying, but that authenticity, like, why would you have a comment on that? Like, we've seen it with Black Lives Matter, the war in Ukraine. Like, no one cares that you've put a blue and yellow thing on your fridge. Like, lovely. and it's for my kids a great message, but unless you're doing something that's contributing, you know, what's the point? And it's the same for organisations. Like, don't greenwash, rainbow wash, all the rest of it. It's really important that actually, if you are going to have a take on something or do something within your comms, that you see it through end to end. It's an authentic move, and it sort of goes back to, like you say, about having authentic purpose. Otherwise it is a bit awkward. And I think as comms, we've got a real role to sort of play with that and sort of ask, is that actually happening? Is that something we believe in or doing? Because otherwise, like, why are we doing it?
Yeah, there's a podcast I started listening to. It's by Ali Mack. It's called Changes. She interviews all these famous people. She talks to them essentially about change, and it's really kind of, because she goes through, okay, how did you make the change when you were sort of transitioning careers? So she had sort of Joanne McNally on there talking about when she left PR and then became a comedian. She's had people like Jimmy Carr. She's had Davina McCall talking about menopause. It's a really good podcast. I recommend it. But what I really learned from that is around how those people use those pivotal moments in their lives and how they sort of use those moments to pivot them forward in a change. And I know we hate that word pivot, but what it makes me think about is, even in our own organisations, how do we use those changes to innovate and to help the business or the organisation go forward? And I think about, at the moment, with the cost of living crisis, so we're at the front lines, and I mostly do internal comms because I hate speaking to journalists, but I think about it from the aspect of, how am I helping the organisation understand where the gaps are? So we know there's the Great Resignation. We know there's things like quiet quitting. How are we communicating those things that I'm hearing on the ground from employees, whether that be our own employees or employees in other organisations, or what's generally happening in the space, and communicate that to our senior leaders so they understand that these things are happening? Because some of them won't know what Joe Blogs is doing or Corporate Natalie is doing on Twitter. They won't know that she's talking about quiet quitting on TikTok and all that kind of stuff. They won't know. So it's about us saying to them, you've got this whole gamut of people who are silently disengaging from the workforce. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I think it's we live a little reference. Like, I'm going to be like, listen to the show notes because that's what we talk about. But there's a TED talk and a similar thing by a guy called Jim Hemmerling, and he talks about, you know, like transformation and change. He said, you know, the reason businesses get it wrong so much is because they focus on, like, this is going to save us money. It's about headcount and efficiency, and people, they don't give a shit. They don't really care about that kind of stuff. And he says that the key thing is around putting people first, and it is about people and storytelling and emotion. And I think that two-way communication and listening to people, that is so much more of value than that whole being seen to be doing the right thing, or kind of being seen to do the right thing around cost of living. Because yeah, I think it does really matter to your internal staff, but also your stakeholders and how you're seen as a brand.
Yeah. I think the people first is a really good point, especially in today's society. I feel like a lot of people now have realised that a lot of the organisations we used to think were amazing on the outside, and I won't call any of them out, but most of you probably know the ones I'm talking about. But then when they eventually get exposed for not being as great as they are, you will find that the heart of it is because they didn't put people first, whether that's their own employees, whether that's subcontractors, whether that's people who make their garments or make their products. They never put them first. And I think about all the things around greenwashing. And if you think about even change, you think about the climate change crisis that we're going through at the moment. That's not a change we can just ride out. That's something actually that we need to take actual steps to. But it's also interesting how that is communicated, because are those steps that we're taking, are they just for individuals or are they for the businesses? So how is that communicated? So businesses doing the right thing versus the actual change that we make as individuals. And I think there's a lot of disconnect between how that change is being communicated.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if any of you followed. It's a rugby one. You might have heard this, Harriet. The Worcester Warriors stuff around the club, and how the owners, after, I mean, it was always a club set up by suddenly this big injection of money, right? But they basically folded, bankrupt last week, I think it was. And the PR stuff from that was basically, they firstly blamed the players for not taking enough of a pay cut, and secondly, they then blamed the fans for not coming and spending enough money. It's like, what two key audiences do you not want to like kind of mess with in a situation? And they kind of just went for them. But yeah, you see that kind of incontinuity all the time. If you've not seen it, the Woodstock three-parter on Netflix is fascinating, and it's basically around the Woodstock event in the 60s and how amazing it was, and they tried to repeat it in the 90s, and it just went horribly, like fantastically wrong, because they totally made it about money and the profitable thing. They just lost the essence of what the event was. And it's a really good one for comms, because you just think as soon as you lose that kind of purpose and who you're doing this all for, without sounding too high and mighty, like sometimes you do have to sell something, or you do have to have like a corporate aspect to your comms. But as soon as you lose that kind of people thing, like it's so obvious. And I think, I think definitely at the moment with so much change going on, unless you kind of go back to those basic points, I think you could get really lost in, and also message drift. I know I've chatted to Clemmy Telford before on the podcast, and we were talking about that. You know, you don't always have to have that purpose thing. If it's not a cause or an area that it really fits with your organisation, like you might be better off just not having an opinion. And I think that's goes back to our Will Smith comment earlier.
But then I think also is that thing of control the controllables. So what can I control? What can I not control? With for example, around the Queen's sad passing, we can control the fact that we were now on a media blackout, couldn't put out any comms internally, externally. So what can you do in that moment? You figure out what work has been in the backlog, what campaigns can I plan, what training can I catch up. And I think sometimes people get overwhelmed in that situation around what can I can't do anything now, so we can't. But you can do something. It's not that you just have to sort of sit down and just do nothing.
I think we all get triggered though, because after the pandemic, we're like, oh my god, like it's the same. It's something's going to happen again, and we're all going to be locked down. It's all going to be like chaotic, and I genuinely think we are still like getting over that. Like something changed, you're like, that's it then. Like I saw rates going up the other night, and I was like, oh, here we go. And I think it's that cynical communicator in me, like it's going to be the doom scrolling. But I think it's really important, like you say, you kind of think about what else you can do and be proactive. Otherwise, we'd just be pretty depressed.
Yeah, because I think you probably know this better than me because you're on TikTok, whereas I'm less on TikTok, a bit more on Instagram. But you remember the whole
I'm a lurker,
thing.
everyone. Can I just say I'm not putting those of TikToks out? I just want to say.
Follow Rebecca's TikTok. But you remember over the summer when everyone was going mad at Instagram because they changed essentially the platform and they were trying to become TikTok, and everyone was saying boycott Instagram. Now, boycott Instagram. I don't know how many people boycotted Instagram on that day. I mean, I went on it by accident, and then I realised I was supposed to be boycotting it today. But the thing is Instagram is going to change as a platform. If you are a creator, if you are a brand, if you are a communicator, you have to be able to ride that wave and say, it's changing. What do I need to do to upskill, to sort of maybe hone my audience? I control a lot of my audience. If I think about, for example, local government, we have newsletters, we have our residents' email addresses. How do you make sure that you're future-proofing yourself and you're not dependent on a platform? Because we've seen that time and time again. Platforms either vanish, they change, they merge into another. Currently Elon Musk is buying Twitter. That could change within a couple of months and it's completely different. So how do you think about what are those things that we can future-proof ourselves against as a comms team so that we're okay? And I just think about even crisis comms. How many crisis simulations did I do for royals passing away over the years? Countless, endless. And I don't think that we're in a place now where you can just say, oh, if a crisis happens, we'll be okay. No, what are those processes? Because so much stuff is happening in the world and it's changed. We don't have that same, and also we have to be faster, because by the time you've figured out that that you work at the airport, there's been a plane crash, that news has already spread. Someone's filmed it on their phone, put it on Twitter, put it on Instagram. It's gone like wildfire, and then everyone's looking at you for the response. So it's how fast can you react as well.
Yeah, it goes back to those kind of basics and processes rather than knowing what you can't predict. Like you could not have predicted this year. I'm sorry, like monkeypox. It's just you wouldn't have put it on. The odds were not good for the series of unfortunate events of 2022. But going back to your point around platforms, it's such a good one because I sort of specialise in kind of youth engagement stuff a lot, and we always get this around. Well, it was. I was at an event maybe 8 years ago and someone said Snapchat is inappropriate, it's not going to be for us, and then it was for everyone, and now it's actually kind of dropped by a lot of universities. It's not necessarily where they're going to they'd rather put energy into TikTok now, But you see it again with like, oh no, I don't really get TikTok, it's not for me. I think as communicators, it is about, you know, going on there, exploring like as a channel. And it doesn't have to be for you personally. Again, you're not the target audience always. It's understanding how does that add, and also being really good at stopping things, like what things don't work for you anymore. Because I think in comms as well, there's that tendency to like think, oh, we've got to be on everything. Well, you don't. It's better to do, you know, 2 or 3 things really excellently than trying to be across everything. But those 2 or 3 things might actually shift. And definitely in a crisis, it's like you might not predict the crisis, but actually, if your protocols are right, you know that crisis happened. That means we're going to pause all our comms for now. We're going to focus on something else. So it's just having, if those processes are in place, you kind of feel strong no matter what kind of 2022, dare I say, next year even throws at us. I'm excited / daunted. I don't want to put any predictions out there right now, though. 2023.
2023, I have no predictions for 2023, if I'm honest. None at all. Not even going to attempt to predict 2023. All I'm going to say is that I know I've got 2 weeks off in January. That's all I know about 2023.
Take the plan month by month, H.
just take it. And I think that's the thing, is this, things move really quickly, but they also move really slowly. We've all been there in comms where, you know, you've been planning this thing for ages, and then finally it happens after 6 months. It's been pushed and pushed and pushed. And then there's times where a change just comes within a second. Someone like a chief exec or whoever resigns, and within 2 weeks or you have a new chief exec interim, and then everything just blows up, and that's the nature of it, isn't it?
But have you ever been in organisations where they've done that whole thing around like, what's your 5-year plan? Like, could you imagine having like I don't, even a year plan's a push, like 5-year, like, gee, it's not going to happen, is it? So I think there is that, you do still need to have your kind of a longer term view and not be too short term. But equally, if your processes and basics are right, like, we're pretty resilient. I think that the past few years and the way that we've been on has, if it's taught us anything, it is that we can be resilient with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So my biggest advice is probably make friends with your corporate resilience people, because everyone's needed them in the last 2 years, and then just think about what wave am I going to ride? Am I going to do fewer, bigger, better? What am I chopping out? And equipping yourself for the future, because none of us know, and it's about those survival tactics and having your anchoring things in place, so your well-being staff, your standards, your boundaries, and your consistency factors. That's how I'm riding this wave.
I'd say all of that, and then add in find the networks like this one, commsHERO, of course, that sustain you. And that can be as formal or informal. I've had that many comms groups and little chats and group things that I'm on, and you know the people that kind of you enjoy being around, and you can just go, my client's on this, it's absolutely nuts, I need to kind of offload. And we've had so much of that this week, and it can just be a few gifts between a few comms people that make you feel loads better. And gifts are for old people, I know, but you know, I did turn 40, as someone's kindly said it was a big birthday. I've just seen that in the comments. Yes, it was. Thank you. I think we're about done with the recording now, and we're on time, which I'm pretty proud of. Kate, I don't know if you wanted to wrap up.
Has anyone got any questions for us?
Hello. Yes, we do have. Oh, I've just realised how close I am to the screen now.
Kate, close it.
So we do have a question. We have a question from Andrew Gledhall. So here we go. Here it is. So do you think it becomes harder and harder to switch off, not just professionally, but also personally, because of we work in comms and because of our job? Like we say, we've got to be plugged into what's happening on stuff all the time. And he actually spends more time on Twitter than he does with his family, unfortunately.
Oh, that is tough. Yeah. And I think that in terms of what H was saying about those kind of anchoring points and what's important, I think particularly during the pandemic, I was getting to the point where I was like watching 10 o'clock news, watching Newsnight, and then being like, I can't see because I'm actually terrified. And I think that you just have to know those triggers and balances yourself. Like, yes, you do need to know what's going on, but actually the news agenda is quite repetitive and in one big cycle. So you might just go, I kind of know that, or I need to build in a bit of space, just do something totally different. listen to Have You Got 5 Minutes, or read or read something totally different. Like I started to read a lot of business stuff and factual stuff, but started to read like fiction, which I haven't really put much energy into, but particularly this year I was like, I really need that escapism, just as something totally different. So yeah, that's kind of, I think it's hard to switch off. You just need to build that stuff in. I don't know about you, H.
I am going to give a really practical one. So I this year introduced on my phone the time thing, the time limit. So I give myself time limits on social media and different platforms. So I actually have to physically press the button to say 15 more minutes, or let's cancel the time limit for today. So that's what I actually do. So I have the time limit for different apps on my phone. The other thing I think, which is really important, is just know. So, for example, I commute in the morning on the train. So in the morning when I'm commuting, I will look at my emails or have a glance at it and just see what's on there. But I'm also what do I need to know? So what is it I need to know for that day? So do I need to go in and get so for me, the easiest thing is actually getting the email in the morning from Cantor. They've rebranded it now. I can't remember what the new name is. But I get the email every morning, which is just basically the summary of the newspapers. And I read that so I know what's happening in the world from that summary. So I then don't have to go on Twitter and check Twitter. That's helped me as well. So yeah, there's different things you can do. But as Rebecca said, is that news cycle it's just a loop. I mean, I work for the Sky News. I see it all day, the same thing over and over and over again. And I'm thinking, I don't need to see this. What are those main things? What are the key takeaways I'm taking away from this? And then go on to the next thing. And even in the evening on my way home, I don't listen to any worky kind of podcasts or anywhere kind of things. I listen to comedy podcasts. Some nights I'm walking home, I listen to Alan Carr's travel show. I don't listen to the kind of worky stuff in the evening. I tend to like block that out for myself. That's probably my big one.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, like you say, I've not tried those timing apps thing, but I can tell you right now, I think yesterday I maybe spent like 4 hours on TikTok.
You go into the TikTok hole, and then suddenly you're buying some
ending,
Amazon hack. My storage is kind of up to lately, and my daughter's like, "If it was this because you watched TikTok again?" I'm like, "Yes, it is." Like, I'm a total victim.
You start singing the songs and stuff in your head, and you're like, "It's getting too much now." This is it.
Yeah, it's taken over.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's it for questions for now, guys, from the audience. But I've just got one question. So you mentioned before to not do every single platform in social media terms, because if you're not doing them well, why even do it? So which platforms would you say that are the most important for brands at the moment to jump on?
I think it totally depends on audience, I think, like genuinely. I don't buy into the fact that TikTok isn't just for youth audiences. It genuinely is like a real fast growing platform for all ages. And that is something I think if you can get your creative content and have the right mindset for TikTok, it can work really well, because you can also use a lot of that for Reels. It just depends on the type of work you want to put into it. There's a lot of people that do it really, really badly, and they're still making it all about them. And it's still about your content, but reframing it in the context of TikTok. Like you were saying, whether it's the corn trend or whatever it is, a trending bit of sound, you just have to reframe that. And Ryanair's a really great example of just getting the pitch right that's right for their brand. I don't think you have to change who you are as a brand fully. It's just recognizing the stretch of your kind of conversation. So yeah, I'd say TikTok is probably a really great one, but I think it's just a good example of how to do kind of video for community really, really well.
I'll give 2 examples. So internally, one of my big things, and I learned this when I was at the CAA working on the collapse of Thomas Cook, and it was, what is your single source of truth in your organisation? And for us, within the department, we're business partners. We have a really amazing SharePoint page. That is our single source of truth for those people. So every other channel that we use, whether that be Yammer, whether that be Slack, whether that be Teams, whether that be anything else, we drive them to that single source of truth. And that's the same with the rest of the business, driving people to Today at Sky, which is our big sort of overarching intranet page. And that for me is so important. So it doesn't matter whether you're using Slack or you're using a email newsletter. It's what is a single source of truth that people can go to in the business and find what they're looking for. The other thing I would say about the external side is just think about, what is it you're trying to achieve? So and I'm going to bore people now because I'm going to talk about rugby, and I didn't really want to do that. But there is a Rugby World Cup going on at the moment, the women's game. And one of the biggest challenges that is happening for us in the UK is that the matches are on too early in the morning because they're in New Zealand. And there is a problem with rights about who has the rights to share that content on social media. So people are missing the highlights. Now, you can put that on any single, you can put that on Instagram, you can put that on TikTok, you can put that on LinkedIn, you can put it on Twitter. But the problem that they essentially have is that content is not being shown in the different countries because of who has the rights. Now, the thing I would say, if I was a betting person and if Dominic was not fed up of me, who's the head of comms at World Rugby, is then you have to start thinking about how do you use other things like user-generated content in order to get your message across, and then which are the best channels to get that message across. So for him, his biggest thing is, how do I get all the people in the stands to share my content on their channels? And I think you have to also look at what is up against you, because he has access to all the channels, and World Rugby has the best social media content out there in sport, but he has a big problem in terms of who has the right. So he has to flip it on its head and think which one is the best for user generated content so that I'm able to get my message out there. So it's also looking at the problem you have around your channels.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. It's been a fantastic first day of commsHERO week. And like I said earlier, I literally can't believe it's the end of the first day. Like, what's happened? So thank you to everyone for sharing all your pictures on social media. Don't forget to carry on sharing. At the end of the week, we're going to be announcing some amazing prizes. So you've all seen the leaderboard. So yeah, we've got some fantastic Amazon vouchers up for grabs there. The more you engage with the event, the more the higher you will climb up the platform. And for your pictures on social media, there'll be a lot of Krispy Kreme vouchers going out. So at the end of the week, we'll just choose a few people that we can send all these goodies to. So thanks again, Rebecca and Harriet. It's been a great session.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.